Hello and welcome to Unit 2 in our early U.S. history class. During this unit, we're going to cover a lot of ground. We're going to talk about the first peoples of the North American continent. We're also going to then move on to talk about contact between Europeans and indigenous peoples in various places in the Americas, including Spanish conquests in Mesoamerica, as well as the French patterns of colonization and trade, and then British patterns of conquest and colonization on the eastern seaboard. We're going to think about how these various European empires started to compete with one another, but also with different native groups for control of land and resources in North America. So as you move through this unit, think about why that was the case. Why was North America seemingly so valuable to the Europeans, and in what ways did they think about land, resources, and control of those things differently than did most Native American peoples? Much of what we'll be covering in this unit will help prepare us to place Camilla Townsend's book, Pocahontas and the Powhatan Dilemma, in its proper context. And we'll be reading that following this unit during the first reading week. So just keep that in mind. The readings that we'll be covering are the first 4 chapters of the American Yop. We'll also be looking at a Library of Congress online exhibit that contains both primary and secondary sources called 1492, An Ongoing Voyage, and we will look at some primary sources on 17th century New England. So that's one of the specific regions of British colonization that often gets quite a bit of attention in U.S. history classes. But also keep in mind the mid-Atlantic colonies and the southern colonies, which centered first around Jamestown and Virginia, all had kind of unique patterns of life and society. What were some of the differences, or some of the reasons, I should say, for those differences between those 3 general regions of British colonization? Why didn't they all develop essentially the same kinds of patterns of religion, culture, and political life and economic life? What were the main reasons that they became unique regions? And during the last couple of chapters in the American Yop, we're going to think about mid to late colonial period rebellions, what the reasons for those were, how they were related to indigenous peoples in the various British colonization regions, and then we'll also study the 7 Years' War, which, as John Green points out, was actually 9 years long. In the Americas, the conflict was referred to as the French and Indian War, so think about why that was the case, what that title means, how native peoples were involved in the conflict. And then in 1763, in Paris, when the peace accords were negotiated, also keep in mind that no indigenous peoples were invited to the table. Spoiler alert here, Britain won big in the 7 Years' War in the Americas. France essentially lost all of their possessions in North America. Spain lost Florida to Britain, although Spain did acquire Louisiana, which was a very amorphous and vaguely defined territory at that time, but that presented certain challenges for Spanish administration. Also, the British acquisition of large swaths of French colonized territories in what is today Canada and in the Great Lakes region also created some problems for British administration. So think about the ways in which the 7 Years' War and its outcomes set the stage for the grievances and the conflicts that eventually led to the Declaration of Independence not too long thereafter in 1776, and then the American Revolutionary War. We'll get to that war when we start Unit 3. So I hope that you enjoy Unit 2.